code on this computer. All right. As he and I are working together on a book project about his life. And so a little bit of background on myself. So I think probably everybody here does know me, I think. But anyway, so I've been coaching hurdles since the 1990s. I think 94 was the first year that I started. And since then, I've just been picking it up, and figure it out. And in my journey in the hurdles, started the Nehemiah connection started in the very beginning. I was in a big basketball family, and I didn't really think of track as more than something to do during the spring as a break from basketball. And then it was my junior year of high school when I saw a clip, a video of the race in Zurich, the 1293. And I was so blown away. I was like, it was in my coach's office. I was watching it, and I was like, Coach, how do I learn how to do that? And I never learned how to do that, but that was the beginning of the journey. And so in, I guess it was college. Yeah, my first year of college, I came across a huge volume called the Track and Field Omnibook. This book right here, I still have it, from 1984. And there's, in the hurdle section, there's an interview with Ronaldo with John Hendershot from Track and Field News. And there's also an explanation of his training from when he was with Coach Paquette in Scotch Plains. And so I read that like it was gospel, and just tried to keep figuring things out from there. And so ironically, Gene Paquette was a mentor of mine before we ever met, before I even knew who he was, from having read that section in the Track and Field Omnibook. And then, it keeps going on and on. And as I keep trying to figure things out in terms of how to hurdle more efficiently, more fluidly, and more proficiently in my life as a coach, I always keep coming back to Nehemiah. And despite the fact that there's been so many innovations and great hurdlers after his career ended, to me he's still the gold standard of what it looks like to be literally poetry in motion. So there's that. So let me go ahead and introduce Ronaldo. He is part of what inspired me to want to write a book about him. I'm so glad he agreed to the project. Is I like people who inspire people, and before I knew who he was on a personal level, I could tell he was a special person, because when I was nobody, pretty much back in 2004, and I had interviewed Coach Paquette for my website. I asked Coach, do you think Ronaldo would mind an interview? And I was simply gonna be like, get out of here with that. and Coach asked him, and like a couple days later, he said, yeah, here's his number, give him a call. And to me, that's kind of guy Ronaldo is. He doesn't care about your status. He doesn't care about what you've accomplished. He cares about who you are as a person. And he's a very giving person. And so when I did interview him, he spoke of something that spoke to my heart, which was hurdling as an art form, which is something I always thought of myself, but always pushed in the back because I never heard anybody else talk about it. So when I heard him talk about it, I was like, man, if the best whoever did it is talking about it as an art form, maybe I'm on to something here. And that really helped to define my coaching career. And I pass it on to everybody I coach, whether it's directly talking about it or whether it's indirectly through how I coach. So yeah. And then also on the call is Gene Paquette, Ronaldo's coach from his high school days and off and on all the way through his professional career. And again, Gene was a mentor of mine before he knew he was. and also I'll never forget the one time that my coaching partner and I at the time, back in 2005, went to visit Gene in Brevard, where he used to live, Brevard, North Carolina, and we brought one of our athletes with us, and Gene coached him for a session. And watching Gene coach in person was not only inspiring, but I just soaked it all in and took it home with me. And so, you know, the energy, the creativity, the willingness to take risks, all stuff that I learned from Gene, that kind of validated the path I wanted to take. Okay. All right, so Joe Gucci, a teammate of Ronaldo's from high school, is also on the call. Glad Joe can make it, and I'm sure he can provide much input regarding the high school training as we talked about it. All right. Let's get to the questions. Hold on. Get my tabs straight.
Before we get started, my name is not Lynn Lochner Nehemiah. She shared her screen with me on a Zoom call, and I guess it's showing that it's her. But it's my computer, and this is me. I don't have any other kind of thing going on here.
Well, that's never mind.
All right. So we can tell by the face it's not your wife. All right. I got somebody trying to get in and they don't have the link. Hold on. Let me ask my first question first. All right. So first thing I want to start with, Ronaldo, would be gallery. Your inspiration. So I know, like, you started hurdling in 9th grade, and where you lived in Scotch Plains, 9th grade was still middle school, what we called junior high back in the day. So that was before you got with Gene. So tell me what influenced you to want to try it, and your 9th grade coach, how he worked with you and helped developing your love and your talent.
Well, thanks, first of all, for having me, and I'm so grateful that others thought the conversation worthy to join as well. As I've told everyone, I grew up in Scotch Plains, and we lived on a corner, and we had a split rail fence, and I spent many a day, like any kid, running and jumping over this fence all the time, just thinking it was cool. I could run and jump the fence and not fall down and, get away from whoever was chasing me. And it wasn't until I think it was 1972 or so when I saw the Olympics and Rod Milburn running, and this guy is running and jumping over what I thought were fences at the time. I didn't know the formal name of them were hurdles. And my immediate response is, man, I can do that. I do that all the time. And so that was the impetus for putting the image of what I thought was pretty cool in my mind. And then when I went into junior high school, 9th grade was still the highest grade in in middle school, but junior high school. And trying out for the track team, nobody wanted to hurdle. He asked who wanted to hurdle. No one raised their hand. I felt kind of special because I was the only one to raise my hand, and that in and of itself started me on, a journey that I never knew would go the way it did. So it was mainly the fascination, the curiosity, the dare to be daring, if you will, at that point. And then a guy who, complimented me along the way and was very encouraging. I wasn't anything to write home about in 9th grade, but Coach Thomas was very encouraging.
Cool. Talk a little bit more about Milburn, because I'm a little too young to remember all those guys, but just knowing the history, there was before him, there was Willie Davenport, and during his time there was Thomas Hill.
Guy Drew, all these guys.
The Frenchman.
Yeah.
What stood out to you about Milburn that made you say, whoa, he's doing something different?
Well, Milburn had a unique hairstyle. He had a part in the middle of his head. So that's the first thing. He had an afro with a part down the middle, and I basically took on that part, and it wasn't all the way in the middle of my head; it was just in the front. But that was my little version of Junior Rod Milburn. He was powerful. He was fast. I was always fascinated how 2 people, 3 people, 4 people could go over the hurdle at the same time, but that one person got off the hurdle first. And I thought that was kind of special and unique ability. And he was fast. You know, the hurdles are the symbol of track and field, balance, speed, total athleticism. And so I always thought, man, this guy must be pretty talented to be able to run and keep his balance. And he wasn't the tallest hurdler out there. And that's the other thing that impressed me. It wasn't so much his size. It seemed that, he had an athletic prowess and a determination about him that set him aside from everyone else. And then he exuded this confidence. Rod Milburn, as you know, Steve, through your research of him, was a very quiet, person.
Yeah.
And his running did his talking. Even when he was really at the peak of his game, he was still understated as an athlete. And so I like that too, the quiet confidence, but yet the assuredness of who he knew he was and what he was trying to accomplish as far as being the best athlete he could be. And so throughout my entire career as a youngster, I would take pieces of athletes from a variety of sports, characteristics that I kind of, wanted to have a piece of them within me that represented me. I was never, I don't think I was arrogant. I may have, carried myself that way in my presence on the track, but I don't think I was verbally arrogant. And I did have a respect for my competitors, but yet I had this, when you run into a Gene Poquette in high school, and Gene almost dares you to prove him wrong, and you don't want to prove him wrong. And then as you go along the way and things are starting to happen, you start believing that, 1 + 1 does equal 2.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do it in that process and build the foundational blocks the way Gene was teaching me, within the hurdles and within training, the end result was unimaginable success. I mean, I think it may have surprised me at times. It may not have surprised Gene, but it did surprise me because I was a student, and his eyes were seeing what I was doing, and I was just trying to do what he was asking me to do.
Right. Gene, let me ask you, what did you first see in Ronaldo that stood out to you? This kid's going to be special.
There was a junior high meetup at the high school track, and I saw this guy about 5'6.5" at the time, and he was 3-stepping the hurdles. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're familiar with junior high runners who generally don't have the same coaching people as in, let's say, in the high school level, although there have been a couple, you don't see junior high hurdlers 3-stepping.
Right.
And it looked totally natural, and he was just running away from everybody. So all I did was I filed in the back of my mind, we're going to hook up next year, and then I forgot about it after that until the time came.
Mm-hmm.
First impression was he's 3-stepping. Nobody taught him that. It came from him. It came from, part of it was his extreme competitiveness. All right. Now Ronaldo, I don't know how surprised he was when he realized he was 3-stepping, but once he did it, he just kept doing it. So.
And this was the same spacing and height as the high school hurdles?
Yeah, I mean, I had, pardon?
Were the hurdles 39 inches and?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't think they go lower for the junior high.
No.
Okay.
The interesting thing is that Coach Thomas, like I said, he was a great encourager, but he never told me how to do any of that. He just said, let my legs flow and you can 3-step. And I didn't know what that was because I hadn't seen it. No one else on the team was hurdling but me. And I remember the first time I did it through adrenaline, I did it for probably about 5 hurdles. And I was tickled pink that I was 3-stepping. And then I realized what I was doing and I went to 5 steps, you know, and then I 3-stepped the last 2 hurdles. So that was my first experience 3-stepping. And then I remember up on the high school track, by that time I had enough confidence to know and expect to 3-step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, awesome. Let's talk about these workouts. I guess we're skipping ahead to junior year. I guess because you got injured your sophomore year. So I guess we're skipping ahead to your junior year. So the legendary workout is the back and forth workouts that everybody is probably familiar with and has borrowed just in some shape or form or another. Do you remember your introduction to that workout and your initial response the first time you did it?
Well, you can never forget it if you talk the right way with Coach Poquet. So the back and forth, which gets a lot of the credit, and Gene, you can chime in here. Everything that we did amounted to like 2 miles. I mean, I started training with the middle distance guys, with Joe and all these guys. So 24 200s, those kind of things. 8 to 12 400s, whatever it was, but and trying to jog in between the intervals, I would walk diagonally across the track to meet up with the middle distance guys. So that mindset paralleled the mindset of the hurdles. So the back and forth, the 200, 300 hurdles and 60 yards each way, so 120 yards, and sets of 10. We worked up to 10. I don't think we started right out with 10. We may have. And then the emphasis on the back and forth wasn't just the volume, but it was also you had to have presence of mind what you were doing. So it was a technique workout or an endurance workout. But Gene was not going to let me get lazy over the event. He didn't want me to practice bad habits, and I had to be in the right position. And it was extremely taxing. And Gene watched the entire workout. So it wasn't any cutting corners. And it was probably harder than the 24 200s and all those other things because it was so physical. But Gene's mantra for me was that I was going to be the best conditioned hurdler out there. And so it would not ever be because of a lack of conditioning. And so once I bought into that concept, I think it wasn't as hard to get me to buy into the others. And then obviously as you get results from that, you embrace it even more.
Oh yeah.
Is that how I received it, Gene?
Yeah, I think so. Remember, Ronaldo came up in his sophomore year, but effectively with a very early season injury in a shuttle hurdle relay race, he was done for the season. So we were faced with whatever we could accomplish in his junior and senior year, okay? When you're first learning how to hurdle and you're trying to master the different aspects of it, the lead leg first, get that down before anything, then you can go to the trail leg and put it together. Don't try to teach everything all at once because you're not going to master any of it. Well, when you're spending your junior year becoming mechanically sound, there's a little bit of a sacrifice in conditioning, okay? So when I came up with the back and forth idea, I figured there's no way you're going to be able to do this and not condition at the same time, okay? We did it, twice a week, Ronaldo?
Yeah, twice a
Maybe
week.
a Tuesday and a Friday, or a Monday and a Thursday, or something like that. There was one rest day, but then the other days were 220s, whatever, ladders, sets of things. And I guess you started out initially maybe doing 4 or 5 in a set.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no way where you start with 10. Some people never achieve 10 once.
Coach,
and then over time, pardon?
I have a workout from May 18th, 1977, if you want it.
Go on.
It was a 1 or 2 mile warm up, 2 by 110, 110 yards, strides, 3 by 220 with a 220 yard bounce, walk, recovery, and then a 440 bounce after each set. My times, I'm showing 26, 27, 2 were about 30 to 32. So there was a question there on the recovery. So it was, again, this was a little bit later in the season. But I was probably one we did a workout together. I don't think I was doing that with Mikowski or anybody else. It was with hurdlers and sprinters. So there was a question there on the recovery. So that was just one that I have.
Okay.
That was
so
9.
anyway, I'm sorry. So anyway, uniquely, the back and forths permit you to master the mechanics, and at the same time, it's one hell of a conditioner. That's all I can say. And when you get to the point, I mean, what do we do? At least three sets. Mm-hmm. So if we started with sets of 5 to a set, then we did 3 5s. Well, that's 50, 100, 150 just starting out. And you work up to the point where if you're doing 3 sets of 10, you're doing 300 hurdles. And you're not doing 300 hurdles any old way. I mean, the minute you start going bad, you just stop. Because then you're going to just practice your errors, you know. And what you'll do is you become an expert at the errors and not at the doing it the proper way. So it served 2 purposes. I guess it's one of the most strenuous workouts you ever had to go through.
Did you?
Yeah, I loved and hated it at the same time.
Yeah.
I loved, obviously, after I started seeing how strong I was getting, but it was painful. It was extremely painful. Gene was a stickler for being as perfect as I could, practicing the right habits. He would not let me practice bad habits. You know, I had to be in attack mode over the hurdles, you know, 2 easy off the hurdle and 3 attacking into the hurdle, 3 easy off, but I had to be in position, hips in position. And if I started floating, getting long or rotating, you know, we would stop because I had to be mentally focused. And if I wasn't mentally focused, then everything else didn't even really matter. But so it took some time really to build up the stamina, as he said, up to 3 sets of 10, but just 150 are tough, especially if you're doing them the way he wants you to do them. And then you're going 60 yards each direction. So that's 120 yards for 1 pass. So, you know, you're doing what, 500, 600 yards on 5 passes, you know, and, or 700, whatever that is. And that's rough for a sprinter. And, but I did it. You know, it's one of these things where, you know, you look at him sideways and you're going, you know, is he winging this? What is this? And, but you do it because I didn't want to not do it and not reap the benefits, because then I couldn't blame him. I'd have to blame me. And my mentality was always, I never wanted to blame someone else. So I would do it, whatever it took. And then if it didn't happen, then it was on me. So, and then throughout the whole process, Gene, I think we experimented with a lot of different ways to train, to get me to respond differently, to build on different things. There wasn't any real true manual that we followed. I think we created our own, Gene, you know?
I agree. Yeah.
Was there anybody else that you trained with, or anybody else that you coached, Gene, who could come near that kind of volume?
As a hurdler? No.
In the back and forth workout as a hurdler, yeah.
Oh, actually, The back and forth maybe started even back when in 1968, and I had a pole vaulter by the name of Scott Hurley, who at that time broke the state record. I think it was 13.8 and 3/4 or something like that. But because a lot of these pole vaulters are really such good athletes too, he hurdled. And he wasn't real fast, but he was very athletic and willing to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we did some back and forths, maybe just to get a little stronger, because most of his time was spent pole vaulting. But he would like win the hurdles in the watch-on conference, in a conference meet or something like that. But I really remembered it in 1974, 75, 75, 76. And then I realized that in his junior year, we couldn't spend as much time on conditioning as I would have liked to, because that extra time conditioning was going to take away from mastering the mechanics. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the absolute best thing you could achieve if you want to get the mechanics down and some degree of conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
As it turned out, we carried that forward over into a senior year, because later on you might want to talk about it, but you know, I'm not a great believer in speed.
Hmm.
You know, speed work to us ended up being jamming. Speed work was changing his cadence between hurdles, not speed work in the sense that a sprinter does speed work.
Mm-hmm.
Speed work even was had a tinge of conditioning, because a speed work in late season before the big meets would be to run a 23-200, take a 30-second break, and then match it with another 23-200, and then go walk a lap and do that 3 times. Now that's, to me, that's speed work, but it's speed work based on conditioning, but you can only do it after the conditioning. So I think it's 85% strength work, 15% speed work, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening, I was reading an article, recently that appeared in Track and Field News, talking about Ronaldo and Greg Foster. Did you ever see that, Ronaldo? It was pretty good article. It's somewhat recent, last couple of months. If not, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
But what Ronaldo said, and he was talking about when he ran the 15, the 13-15 was the first world record.
16, yep, 13-16.
13-16, yeah. And you mentioned, first of all, that was the one you didn't want to even go out and run Dee Cooper or something like that.
Correct.
So you went out there and you broke the world record. And the one comment that stuck with me is that you didn't ever get around to doing any speed work yet.
Right.
So you broke the world record basically off of strength and your character as a competitor. All right, because when did you run the 15? The next week?
I ran 13 flat the next week.
Yeah, so you broke 2 world records. And I mean, how much speed work can you get done between the 2 weeks? You broke those 2 world records with only a background of strength to some extent, I think.
Yeah, we had come off indoors and it was spring break.
Right.
And we were going out to San Jose for spring break and partake in a Bruce Jenner meet. So I hadn't really done any speed work outside of my indoor season.
Right.
And I was running the race thinking I was running against nobody. And then there's Dee Cooper, a world-class hurdler there. And I guess, as Gene said, it was definitely pride because I did not want to lose. I thought I was being set up. I was angry, but I didn't think in my wildest dreams I could run 13-16. And so, yeah, I ran 13-16 through competitiveness. I think also, Gene, just innate ability and know-how, you know, and then, you know, you got to travel back east for a couple of days and turn around and fly all the way back to UCLA, and I ran 13 flat. So definitely didn't have enough time to make up conditioning in those few days.
Wow. So in terms of speed work, basically it is this for some of the coaches. Can you explain what, because Joe mentioned like the bouncing between reps. Can you explain what that bounce consists of? Like if you're doing 200 and then you bounce to 200, what does that bounce consist of?
Well, being up here in Rhode Island and watching a lot of high school training somewhat recently, it seems they like to run something and then walk, and then run something and then walk. And to me, the only time you should walk is between sets, not between efforts in a set. Because there's a difference in your body when you stop and walk, or if you're still imitating the running motion a little bit. So it's really, it's not a jog. Too fast. It's a bounce, so it's a form of recovery. But there's a difference between bouncing the ankles, the feet, coming up on the toes, lifting the knees a little bit, that kind of thing, as opposed to just stopping and walking and then starting and running.
Mm-hmm.
And that was with all my runners.
Mm-hmm.
Joe will tell you, because it didn't matter what event you were with.
It was
we didn't count that jogging as any of the distance.
Right.
The only, when Ronaldo said 2 miles to work out more for the distance runners, that was only the 2 miles of the timed effort.
Mm-hmm.
Jogging was just part of your recovery. It didn't count. So if you bounced rather a 200, that wasn't 200 more. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The bounce was a time for quiet prayer that the workout would be over soon.
I agree.
Help me through this. Lord, get me through this. Especially those 1 minute, 2 minute recoveries after the 220s. Every spring, every year, sophomore year through senior year, was April. Third week in April, and we have temperature in the 70s, and we'd always do that workout. But like Gene was saying, I did that in college. It was something you just don't stop. And your heart rate is up a little bit, right? Stays up, but it's coming down, and then you're ready to go again. And I think physiologically and mentally, it was a good way to recover, and then go to your next one.
Yeah, it ultimately enabled me to embrace fatigue or the pain without falling apart, because I was familiar with that feeling.
Right.
You've never had that feeling, you panic and you fall apart.
Yeah.
But through weeks and months of doing it, I knew what it felt like. I knew I could make it through it. And so in the race, even if I felt somewhat tired, it didn't affect me psychologically or physiologically, because I had been there before, mm-hmm. because of the preparation and training. And I think and I was able to maintain my form throughout the race without falling apart. You see a lot of guys, certain parts will fall apart because they're not physically able to maintain that high intensity. But I could. And as Gene said, Gene let me run 100-yard dash my entire time in high school. I begged him, and because he would never let me sprint, ever. Sprinting was the jamming session. And
it was almost as bad as playing 2-on-2 basketball.
Yeah.
And we avoided that.
That's a sore
in
subject.
High school.
Yeah, so he let me run one time, the 100-yard dash, and I had to basically try to promise him I wouldn't get hurt, because he would have never forgiven me for doing that, because he didn't subscribe to it. And but yeah, he's right. 85% was all strength, and it was one of those things where I would go to a race believing in my heart that there was not another hurdler on the track that was as fit and as strong, and who would even attempt to do the types of workouts we were doing.
Right.
He mentioned that race. Can I just enlarge upon it a little bit?
Sure.
The next town, Westfield, had 2 sprinters, Kelly and Butch.
Yeah.
And Butch was a high school state champ football player and an All-American at Michigan, and he played for the Giants in that.
Yeah, I know you talk about.
And I guess the families in both towns, the fathers of the kids in that and the uncles, they all jammered about, man, who could win between Butch and Ronaldo? And there was a lot of that going on. And to be very selfish, it was also an opportunity to win the Union County Championships.
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than, I mean, he could run a 13.6 high hurdle race at half speed from my point of view. So he ran the high hurdles, the 100, and then it was the 220.
Right.
And he long jumped, which we'll come to later. He long jumped what, once or twice? Once you saw that the guy in second place would never catch it, then you just didn't jump anymore.
Right.
He ran just fast enough to win the hurdles because we were 100 and the 220. Do you remember what good times in the 100-yard dash is as opposed to the 100 meters? Because I had 3 state champs. 2 of them ran 9.8 and 1 of them ran 9.7. And the 2 that ran 9.8, the 2 kids, they also won the 220 in the States.
Mm-hmm.
This guy gets to the finals and he runs 9.4. All right.
That would be about a 2.
What, Butch ran 9.6 or something like that? And then he goes to the 220 on a turn and he runs 20.8. Now, these are fantastic high school times.
They still would.
I knew he could do it. But can you imagine having the best hurdler in the country and he pulls a muscle because he's running some dinky 100-yard dash that doesn't mean anything? I mean, I thought it was more challenging to run at college heights while you're running against the high schoolers at the 39 inches.
Yeah.
So, you know, as this progresses, we'll talk a little bit more about something. Some of my best times as a coach have been in practice, not at meets, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
When you see some of the things that these guys can do,
Yeah.
if they, they dedicate themselves to it. So,
Yeah.
How about never having long jump in your life, never been on a long jump runway, and you break a 44-year-old state record? And the guy that had it was the major competitor of Jesse Owens, who the 10 times he competed with Owens, he beat him 7 times. But he was hamstrung for the 36 Olympics. So Ronaldo, what was it, Carney relays? I had one other kid that was long jumping and I didn't want to leave him home because it was a relay meet, so it was a 2-man relay. So what, we got to the track and you stood on the runway and said, okay, what am I supposed to do? I mean, really? So I said, go down to the takeoff board, and I'll stand at the beginning of the runway and run 4 steps half speed, 4 steps 3/4 speed, 8 steps full speed. Run as fast as you can, and when you get to the board, jump as high as you can. That was the coaching. All right? Believe me. And he jumps 24.11 and a half.
Wow.
And then that article I sent you, and then Ed Grant said, yeah, and then he never long jumped again. Hey, listen, about that Union County meet, Joe, you sent me meet results from the States, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it showed where you were the Union County champ in the 800. But what it did, it listed Kelly as winning the 100, Kelly is winning the 100, Butchie as winning the 220, which wasn't true, and Ronaldo winning the intermediates, which he never ran. So I stopped looking for results from articles.
Really?
Yeah.
I have the art. Actually, I have an article on that. We ran the mile relay too.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It always comes down to the mile relay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's back up a bit. You mentioned the jamming workout a couple of times. Can you explain to the coaches in the room what that workout entailed and why both of you feel that was a good replacement for like what we call speed work?
Well, it was a rhythm race and a rhythm workout. And Gene wanted me to sprint, you know, and
I wanted you to change your cadence,
right,
which is rhythm. We're
right.
saying the same thing.
Same thing.
You're
right.
saying rhythm, I'm saying cadence. And we wanted you to increase your cadence. There's two ways of doing it. One is stand on the side as a coach and yell faster, faster. That never worked for me. Okay, so we had to do something specific. And the way it came about was when we went to the Penn Relays. You ran the 46.5 anchor leg. I got in a conversation with Jim Tuppeny. And I said, you know, I've got this wonderful runner. He's tied the indoor national record a couple of times. And we just can't get that extra 100th of a second or whatever it was to break it. And he said, well, bring the hurdles closer together and make them in between. And I thought about it and I said, well, yeah, because he's going to have to change his cadence. He's going to have to go from a slower cadence, rhythm, to a faster one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how that really all began.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really most of our speed work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how far in did you bring them?
Pardon?
How close together did you bring the hurdles?
We started out with what, 8.5?
8.5 at first.
But then as he got better and bigger and longer, then that was a little bit too close. And then gradually went up to 9 and maybe even 9.5. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it was always, you know, it was the shuffling that they call today, the sprint hurdle shuffle. We didn't have those terms at the time, but that's what was causing me to get my legs and feet to turn over quicker, the rhythm quicker, faster rhythm. Back then, I mean, we didn't have those kind of terms, but you know,
Right.
we had to. Gene needed to generate more quickness and speed out of me in between the hurdles.
Right.
And so that exercise in and of itself did it. And as I got more proficient with it, we had to space them out because we also didn't want me to start backing off
Right.
on the hurdles because you're getting so close. And that's another thing, even with the jamming, Gene watched my technique,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because didn't want to ingrain muscle memory the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just jump in. But then I think I've heard you talk in the past, or they wrote about what you said in the past. And you said one of the things, and we'll attribute it to maybe partly to this workout, but your ability to know when you were going a little bit too quick or whatever, and make little adjustments right in the middle of a race.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just do what you've been practicing. You saw yourself coming up too fast. You knew enough to make some little change so you didn't pay the price.
Yeah, I learned very early without truly knowing, I guess it was just a gift I had, is that I realized that I was generating varying speeds as I went along. So as I got faster from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, things were happening in between. I was losing distance, or, you know, I didn't have the same amount of distance equally because I was getting faster and stronger. And so I'd have to make subtle adjustments with my body. I guess I was gifted with flexibility. So that was another reason why I was able to do it. I was pretty flexible and nimble. But there were many times where, and Gene knows because my junior year at the Eastern States, when the first time I ever fully experienced sprinting in the race over hurdles, I fell down. Remember that, Gene?
No, that was the only race in high school that I never attended.
Oh, okay.
You went with Charlie Waters.
Charlie Waters.
Oh, I blamed it on Charlie, not me.
Yeah.
No.
But I was running against these guys, and something happened from hurdle 3 that I just took off. It was the first time that I ever was really sprinting in the hurdle. You know, it wasn't like a fast 1, 2, 3. It was quick. And I was moving so fast that I was getting so overly rotated that I couldn't, pull back, nor did I want to. and I crashed number 8, I think, and fell down. But I was laughing when I fell down because I was so happy that I finally knew what it felt like to sprint in between the hurdles. And I remember running to Mr. Waters, who had this blanket look on his face, and I said, I did it. I did it for the first time. I can't believe I was sprinting over the hurdles. And I waited to that next year. I just was salivating to come back to that year. And, obviously it was a historical day because I ran 13-1, 13 flat, 12-9 the next year at that same event. But that was, I believe, my true coming out, where I really became that next great hurdler in the making. When I experienced for the first time my body really accepting what Gene had been teaching me all this time, and staying in there, not ducking out, and embracing the speed. And it was a beautiful thing, even though I fell down, but I was laughing because I knew I fell down, and it was one of those times where I could accept it because it was a teachable moment, but it was positive.
Yeah, you kind of had a breakthrough.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this: for someone, let's say in 13s, elite level hurdlers, or on their way to elite level hurdlers, do you feel like the kind of speed work that is kind of the norm now, where you're really driving, all out over 30 meters, 40 meters, 50 meters, do you think that that's counterproductive for a hurdler who has to always quicken it up?
Well, the mindset for everyone today, most hurdlers would never even fathom doing the type of workouts we did. They just don't. They train 100 meters, 150 meters, 200 meters. Everything is speed. They have the advancement of the synthetic track technology, to their advantage. They have lighter hurdles than we had, so they're more aggressive because there's less penalty, physical penalty. We had physical penalties, pieces of meat on the hurdle crossbar. So many of them, with those factors, it's a full-time sport, right? So they're full-time professional athletes. So they have, there's so many different training methodologies. There's massage therapy, there's nutrition. So it's all working to their advantage. Obviously, over the years, bigger, faster, stronger. I mean, that's just a natural evolutionary process. For instance, I just left Miramar yesterday, and Grant Holloway, who ran 7:29 for the world record.
Wasn't that something?
Yeah. Now, if you do that math, 7:29 should almost be 12:70 something.
Yeah.
Right.
But he's still a great hurdler. But I've even had conversations where Grant doesn't transfer his speed evenly. So he uses up a lot of his speed in the first 5, and then he's dying holding on, running 13.0, 13.1s. Well, he doesn't need to run 7:29, 7:30 pace. He can run 7:40 pace and distribute the energy more evenly, and he'd have more at the end of the race. He's very raggedy his last 4 because he's almost out of gas after 5. And so, but that's the mindset of a lot of college athletics now, is that everything is speed, 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 speed. And you only have so many of those in your body in a given season. So, there are many good hurdlers. There's so many that have run in the 13, but they don't do it consistently, only because they've forgotten the technique. Everything is speed and power. But at the end of the day, you have to get over the obstacle. Right. And if you're gonna, if you're running into something 3 or 4 times, you're talking a race that's hundreds of seconds, that's gonna hurt you. So we still haven't seen that, although we'll have, a hurdler here and there who runs fast, but they may not necessarily display the art form that we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about your technique. I know when I interviewed Gene back in 2005, he used the word unitize in regards to the lead leg and trail leg, which is not in the dictionary. So it's a word that he created. Can Can you explain to you what that means, and like for the coaches on the call, what that meant for you in terms of when you're moving at full speed?
It was not almost, it was one continuous motion. You know, for every action there's a reaction. So we, as Gene said, we mastered all of the components, lead leg, trail leg, lead arm, trail arm, independently. And then we learned them to work together in tandem. So in unitizing the lead leg, I'd have to activate the trail leg as soon as the lead leg was attacking. So there wasn't two different motions, because then that would open you up, or your body has to wait for the other part.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of strength in your adductors and your groin and your abs and in your arms. You know, a lot of hurdlers, you know, they're leg hurdlers. They're not using all the limbs. And so we were working and in order to unitize, my arms have to help my legs, but then my mind had to tell myself the minute my trail leg left the ground, it had to keep moving. Couldn't wait and be pulled over it. It had to work in unison with my lead leg. Right. So Gene's term was unitization, unitize the two of them, which I knew was like, it had to go right away. And so when I was doing the back and forth drills in particular, he'd watch and he would tell me if I wasn't unitizing, and they were just two separate components, and we weren't trying to work that. And I was also taught that the lead leg was the most important leg. A lot of hurdlers today think it's the trail leg, but the lead leg initiates everything. So for us, as important as the lead leg was, the trail leg couldn't get left behind. It had to work in unison. So it had to be active as the lead leg was active.
Yeah, we even try to imagine that we could get your trail leg to hit the ground about the same time as
same time.
Which of course you don't, but yeah. Another thing, Steve, we said unitize, and Steve, when he's working with his hurdlers, he also uses the analogy of, imagine you're on a bicycle.
Right.
And it's click, 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 click. And when you're bicycling, neither leg ever stops. It just keeps going, keeps going. Right. And when you think about it, that's a pretty good mental concept too, of not having any leg wait for another leg.
Yeah, I was talking to a hurdler yesterday after the meet. He showed me his race again, and we were talking. And I watched his race, and because he wasn't unitizing, he was opening up. So this way. So this is the apex of the hurdle. Instead of keeping his dive, he was opening up, and therefore the hips dropped. Right. Because he wasn't on this side of the apex. He was over the top of the apex, and he was opening up prematurely. So I said, yeah, so as you're opening up, weight is shifting down. And so even though you're landing like you think you're forward, you're almost vertical. Now you got to rotate forward to start running again. And I said, if you do that 10 times or 9 times, look at the time you're losing. And I said, you know, it's like a series of free falls off of the top of the apex. And I said, it will throw you forward, and you just chase your legs, chase that feeling. I said, but you're trying to see the hurdle. So you're opening up like a lot of guys do, and you can't feel it, but that's what's happening. The body gravity is pulling it down a little bit, and your positioning is changing. And I said, that's what happens with so many young hurdlers who can run faster, but they have to work so much harder. So I said, so when you get vertical coming down, now you have to use your body and your arms to generate new speed. Instead of just falling off and then chasing your legs like you're gonna fall, but you won't. And I just, it's so when I talk to hurdlers, and like my session with Gene was like being in a classroom. I mean, I had to visualize what he was telling me, understand what based on his illustration, his verbal illustration, and then try to make it happen and match it up to what he was saying, and get his confirmation of it. So many hurdlers today, they're into the clock starts, they run. And they're not aware of what they're doing. And you have to be aware of what you're doing in order to make improvements. And so, you know, it didn't matter what I was doing in practice. Gene would tell me, you know, if I wasn't doing it right. And he'd pull me to the side and we'd talk, and he'd show me what the lead leg is supposed to do. He'd emulate the lead leg, or he'd emulate the trail leg, and telling me. And I got to see it enough times that imagery,
right,
I could visualize it and make it become one.
right.
And but a lot of guys and gals too, it's just about speed.
Yeah.
And you have to know where you are, what you're doing, in order to perfect your craft. And so the more of a student you are, the more opportunity you have to advance.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Let me ask you this: when you have hurdlers, if you have hurdlers who kind of back off a little bit because they're afraid of their speed, or they don't know how to negotiate that space, how do you get them to stay in attack mode? Because I think some of what I'm hearing is that people standing up and getting more erect as they come down, it's like they're trying to control what they're doing. And it's like, I guess the jamming workout would perhaps be the answer. You got to kind of, because you did that on the grass, correct?
No.
Maybe the first day we did, but no, not really.
Oh, you didn't?
The only thing we did on grass is 45 inches.
45 inches.
Okay.
So,
What are you laughing about?
we did all kinds of crazy things, but we did.
Well,
Go ahead.
In his senior year, the thing where it really all started, we've never talked about it, Ronaldo and I, but so if I'm wrong or, don't just agree, but I really think where it started was he had tied the national record at 6'9" a couple of times. And so what I did is I got him invited into the 60-yard open hurdles race with Willie Davenport and Charles Foster. I forget who got third that night. So if he had finished dead last, everybody would say, well, he's just a high school kid. But he finished fourth in the Melrose Games Invitation 60, okay? And that told us all a lot, because maybe we worked a little bit on 42-inch hurdles beforehand, but not very much. So he goes out over 42-inch hurdles coming from high school, and he finishes fourth in the Melrose Games. And I think maybe even without realizing it, that was a great confidence builder. It was for me a great confidence builder. And that's what I decided, that we're going to make a 42-inch hurdler out of him before college. All right. And psychologically, I mean, if you're handling 42s, right, then 39s are nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're in the shape that he's in, and with the natural speed that he has, then you're not worried about 39 inches. Okay? So we would practice over 42s. Sometimes we'd have him race in a dual meet. He ran the 42s and everybody else ran the 39s.
Which I was not a fan of.
Which we're not a fan of.
Yeah, the thought of losing didn't do well with me.
Well, a lot of the things you're not a fan of are the things that really made you prove to me. Right?
Yeah.
And I never asked you to do anything I didn't think you could do.
Right.
That's true. And then as we got further down the line, the eastern states proved that. I don't think hurdle height was ever a factor.
No.
Okay, so by the time we get to the under 20 national championships, he goes and he wins it. And then sometime in July? When was the Junior Pan Am Games?
Yeah, July. Yeah.
In early July, mid-July, he goes and he breaks the world record in the under 20, 42 inches. And in my mind, that really all started with the Melrose Games. At least my thinking is that way. So a lot of the things we did, I mean, if you think 42s are high because you're used to 39s, you get used to 42s, then the 39, that's really not that much of a barrier.
And how tall?
And even that stupid going over the 45-inch hurdles, that was just to say, well, you see, 42s aren't that high because 45's higher, and I've done it. So
Yeah.
I don't know, mentally, I think it all plays a role.
So by senior year of high school, how tall were you, Ronaldo?
Pardon?
My senior year, I graduated high school, I was 5'9", 5'9" and a half.
You were
Maybe.
5'9", going over 42s.
Oh yeah.
Broke the world record, the junior world record.
Going over 45s. But that was on the grass, and it was a foam top because they were high.
We wrapped them.
Still, I want to go back to you talking earlier, Ronaldo, about visualizing and the imagery aspect of things. When Gene would talk to you and give you some feedback, and you try to visualize it. Because one of the things that I'm kind of nitpicky about is, and I mentioned this in the other Zoom I did last month, is that the athlete has to be able to feel what they're doing. And like in 21st century, we're all about the iPhone, we're all about video, we're all about looking at what we did before we do our next rep. And hearing you talk, I kind of feel that my old opinion still stands, that you have to be able to feel what you're doing so you can react in those moments when your adrenaline's pumping and you're going faster than you thought you would or what have you. You have to be able to react, and that starts in practice. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, hurdling is a field race. It's a rhythm race. We use the word rhythm. Gene even said, become like a dancer. We didn't fight the hurdle. We embraced it. And so, you wanted to be fluid. But the visualization, so if you're telling me something, I would always spend time trying to visualize in my mind what that looked like.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever he said to me, I'd try to see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would think about it all night till the next day or whatever. And then when we did it 2 days later, I would interpret what I thought he was saying,
Right,
through the feel and the rhythm.
right.
And as I started less fighting the hurdle, meaning trying to really get over the top of the hurdle, but just glide over the hurdle and be more fluid, then I realized that it didn't take as much effort to run the hurdles as it normally would. And so that's what a lot of hurdlers do today. They don't feel the rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
They try to create the rhythm, and they're fighting against themselves all the time because they're trying to power. And hurdling is not really a power race. It's a finesse race. It's a speed race, but and it's fluidity.
Yeah,
it really is. And so Gene didn't want me fighting the obstacle. Just embrace it. Try to be a dancer, smooth. A dancer's smoothly. Dancer's light on his feet.
right.
Dancer's agile. So that's how I was taught. That's what I believed. And then as I started getting results, you buy into it. I mean, as Gene said, he put me to the test. Whether I wanted to do it or not, as I kept having more success on all the different things that I thought I didn't think I wanted to do, I didn't second guess him because I knew I was having success.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, this is working. I don't know where it's coming from, but it's working.
Did you bother with touchdown times at all?
Yeah. We did touchdowns, did we not, Gene?
Yeah. You mean in distance from the hurdle?
Like 1 point between the like when we timed ourselves, trying to go under.
Okay. That was yeah. That was kind of speed. What we do is there'd be no go. I'd start the watch when your lead leg hit the ground coming off the first hurdle.
Right.
And then we'd go, a total of 5 hurdles?
Yeah.
So then I'd stop it when your foot hit the ground off the last hurdle. And then what we try to do with a break is beat your time every time.
Right. Was that a regular
way of doing something competitively in practice, but you're competing against yourself rather than somebody running alongside of you? So let's say we put up 5 hurdles or 6 hurdles, whatever, 5 hurdles. You start going when you want. How fast you are to that first hurdle, you're running. There's nobody saying ready, set, go and starting to watch then. Start the watch as soon as your lead foot hits the ground off the first. Stop the watch as soon as the lead foot hits the ground off the 5th. Get a time. All right. Now, how many times would you do that? 5, 6, 7 times in practice.
6, 7.
And see if you can't beat your time.
Yeah. And in doing so, we start establishing consistency, which was far more important, so that you weren't erratic in your time. So, and then me trying to beat the times kept me honest, because if I was just running, the times could be anywhere. So once I established that first time, I had to try to match it or beat it, which kept a competitive edge. And we, obviously we got pretty good at it. We had some pretty good splits.
Yeah.
So was that a regular thing, or just during like the late season?
No.
Like timing the splits.
I think it was sporadically throughout the season. I mean, once you got in shape. Yeah.
Okay. So Ronaldo, you talked about, well, you're talking to me, you were earlier for the book, you talked about how you could predict your times like to a 10th a lot of the time when you were at Maryland. Would you say that this type of training that you did with Gene is what enabled you to do that? Taking that kind of training with you enabled you to be able to be so sure of how fast you were capable of running?
Yes, because we broke hurdling down in so many different ways, and so those progressions. So by the time I got to Maryland, I mean, I was still doing Gene's workouts at college, and so I was just becoming far more of a student, and then I was just doing different combinations of what he had me do, and I knew, it's a rhythm race, it's a field race. So, when Gene would time me on a touchdown to touchdown, I felt the intensity of the time that I was running and what I was doing. And so if I could replicate that feel, I was either pretty close or surpassing the time I had just done. So I was always chasing a feel, because if I felt a certain way, then I knew that I was running. And in order to do that, I had to, be in the right position over the hurdle and be smooth and keep my balance and everything that he told me, unitizing and really attack. And when that happens, you can feel the speed that's coming with you. There's an increase of speed because you're generating more speed as you go. And so that feel, I couldn't tell you the time, but I could always say, I bet that was faster. And 9 times out of 10, it would be faster. So I can always tell when I was putting forth, a better effort. And I like that, because then that gave me a purpose. As I got older, and especially, when I got really, really good, I love hurdling so much that it had to be purposeful. I remember I used to have 2 watches on me at college, because I didn't trust the person with 1 watch. Because I just wanted to make sure everybody was honest with the time. And Gene could tell you that we could tell based on what I was doing in practice, what I should be doing in the meet. So quantifiably what that would represent. And in college, there were many times when I was breaking world records, especially indoors. I was breaking world records in practice. And so I came to the meet not chasing world record, but knowing that if I ran like I just did in practice, I should do okay. And add adrenaline to it, I would break world records. So that's what was happening. When you get control and command over what it is that you're trying to do, and you're you're so fluid and smooth and in charge of your technique and your hip placement. And then you've done the foundational work that Gene taught in me and instilled in me. That was my pride and joy, is that, yes, I was a very good hurdler, but I was fit. You know, as you saw around those pin relay splits. So that's all because of my training with Gene, that I was able to do all that.
Yeah.
What we also never did in practice was run a full race with a clock for time. We never ran like it was 120 yards then, but 110. We never put up a flight of hurdles, 10 hurdles at 120 yards in practice and tried to see how fast we could run 120 yards. We always ran parts, knowing that we're going to be strong enough when the time came to put it all together and we're in a competitive situation. And that goes true with my runners. We never raced an 800 in practice. Guys against it, never raced a 400. Ran athletes and timed them at their distance in practice to see how we're going to do. We knew what we were going to do based on how we did with the parts. And but remember, even when you were a pro, and one of the things we do is we get under the stands and you'd run, and I'd time you on the way up, and then you'd stop and turn around, and when you ran back, but I would stop to watch as soon as you came off the last hurdle, and then we could pretty much predict how that was working, how well you're going to do in the race at that time. Right? Do you remember that?
Yeah, there are some times where, we'd run over 5, touchdown over 5, get in the blocks on the other side, and take off and run 5 the other way, and try to match that time or beat that time. And and we could pretty much tell what my race was going to be. And I think that was your genius, Gene, that, we pieced the race together in so many different parts. That helped me as far as my first third of the race, the first 3 hurdles of the race, middle part of the race, the back end of the race. And I just, I got very comfortable with where I needed to be and when I needed to be. And then, when you're studying different, as I got older, studying in my competition, I knew where their strengths and weaknesses were. So I would train accordingly. So I knew somebody like Foster was a strong closer. I knew I had to be fit in order to maximize my hurdling gift, because I didn't want to run someone else's rhythm, because you can get into rhythm rot where you're both locked in running the same thing. So
Question for both of you. Do you think, kind of based on what you're saying, do you think that coaches, hurdlers, underestimate the fatigue factor in a 110-meter race?
Say that again.
I was asking.
Do they underestimate it? Yeah, he asked if the coaches underestimate the fatigue factor in the hurdle race. Yeah, I think so.
I don't think any, like high school hurdlers that I know, I don't think any of them are in condition. Because if they were truly in condition, just the extra strength, I mean, if technically, like your guys, the kids you're teaching hurdling and that. So for them, it's a factor, but I don't, is it a factor internationally? I don't know. I don't think so.
I was just thinking because of what Ronaldo said earlier about Holloway, not being strong in that last part of the race. Like, do you feel like that's kind of the norm now? That everybody's focusing so much on speed work that they're not strong for a whole flight of 10 hurdles?
It's each of them have different approaches to it, and I go to so many races. Most hurdlers, for the most part, think that if they win the first 5 hurdles, they can win the race. And I'm like, no, because if you take, let's just say, for lack of argument, everybody's running 13 flat, they're just going to get there differently, right? But the person who's in control of their race and doesn't press and do other things will win the race. And all those other people are trying to make things happen to beat this other person, which is taking them out of their rhythm. And then they're tying up their body because they're using more energy at different points than they should because they're not in condition.
Right.
So they get tired sooner, you know.
Your 1290, your 1293 came about in the last 3 or 4 hurdles of the race.
Right.
I think up to that point, it was fortunate either at a slight edge or you were pretty much even, and you ran away from them at the end of the race.
Right. Yeah. We're neck and neck, and then probably from 7 to 8 is when I started to make my move, and then I
watched for an hour today old Nehemiah hurdle races on YouTube.
Yeah. So it was always, so I was very strong, and he was a bigger man. So most people think he's bigger, stronger, he should, you know, be the guy. But I always told people didn't run me down. Usually I would just run away from them. But I also ran my race, you know. So I knew I couldn't win it at 5, but I also knew I could put a lot of pressure on them at 5 because I was already faster than everybody in the world at 5. But I didn't run out of control. You know, Gene taught me to stay in control. So I didn't know the term at the time, but I was able to distribute my energy more evenly, and I was strong. You know, like Mark McCoy would beat everybody for the first 5 hurdles.
Yeah.
But we never worried about him because he didn't have the back end. He'd run so fast, he didn't have the energy distribution, and he'd just tie up, and then you just catch him at 8, run past him at 9 and 10. He got better, obviously, when he won the gold medal, but a lot of his career, he was a front runner. You know, and then there are guys now that say, well, it takes me a while I'm a build runner. And I said, you know, 13 flat doesn't catch 13 flat. It just doesn't. So you can't spot somebody 3 meters and think you're going to catch them because you're not running your race. You're chasing, which is putting more stress on you. So yeah, most of these, listen, it's all results driven. So I can't argue with anyone. Who am I to tell Grant Holloway, right? Who broke my high school collegiate record running 12:98. Who am I to tell him, and he's the best in the world right now, what he's not doing right? But what I can say is that he received what I said because he's trying to get better. You know, he's not complacent. Well, nobody's better than me right now, so that's good. No, he's like, no, I'm trying to get better. And I said, yeah, you should always want to learn to get better. That's the only way you're going to improve. You know, so because somebody is going to come along that's going to be as good, and if you haven't tried to get better, then they're going to run by you. You know, McLeod, the Jamaican, he was the best for a couple of years, right? His hurdling technique is horrible. Horrible.
Yeah.
And when you're running the same time as everybody else, and they're a better hurdler, that's the person who's going to win.
Yeah.
You know, and speed, you can have too much speed. I've told so many people, you don't need but 10.5, 10.4 speed. You don't need 10.2, 10 flats, 10 speed. You can't use it. You cannot use that speed. You know, you never get a chance to use it because you're overstride. And you know, like Terrence Trammell, I mean, all the speed he had, but it's too much speed to try to control. So less is better nowadays. So it's not the speed that matters. I think, Gene, you can chime in. I think if you're a technically sound hurdler, you can get stronger and you can get faster. But what you can't get as you get older in years, meaning the more years that you're not technically sound, the harder it is going to be to correct it because time doesn't allow you to take longer.
Why you like to be nails fit low?
The muscles.
I feel like doing it. Okay.
My screen, I just see Spider-Man.
I'm using it, so it should be good now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and in terms, when you're talking about conditioning, I mean, some things are just so very basic, and I think a lot of the sport is just thinking basically, the stronger you are, the more relaxed you can run while you're putting out what you consider to be 100% or 95%.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not in shape and you really start to press, you're only going to tighten up. You're not going to keep loose. You're not, and hurdling especially. Can you imagine a hurdler who gets tight? You've got to be so loose in order to navigate that.
Yeah.
So your ability to maintain your relaxation while you're putting out completely depends on your condition.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you relax, the better you're going to utilize whatever your natural speed is. So,
All right,
I don't know if that answers it or not.
Yeah, I want to give a little time for any participants who have any questions. So if anybody has a question for Ronaldo or Coach Jean Paquette, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. Okay, Hector has a question. Those who don't know, Hector Cotto is one of my former athletes who ran for Puerto Rico. I think ran 13. What's your best, Hector? 13:49, 39, something like that. So Hector's asking, did you do anything in particular to work flexibility?
Well, in high school, we had gymnastics class and all that, and I like to do flips and all that. So flexibility, stretching and trying to do a split, as much as as closely as I could. When you're a young kid, you just all that's important. I knew I had to have good flexibility because you're almost kind of doing a quasi Russian split over every hurdle. So I was very flexible, which helped tremendously. I spent a lot of time just stretching, whether that was 20 minutes of sustained stretching, hamstring, quads, with all the little muscles, groin, and all that. I think I still stretch probably more today than a lot of the world-class athletes, just because I like to feel, loose. So that was the extent of my flexibility, was in gymnastics, things of that nature, learning how to do that.
Kind of makes me think of another question I had in mind, was your posture, because you ran much more upright than traditional, and I'd assume that it was your flexibility that allowed you to do so.
Yeah, I always think that, obviously the mechanics of hurdling has to be somewhat constant with every hurdler, but we all look a little different.
Yeah.
But the mechanics, have to be kind of the same, the biomechanics. But it was my flexibility that a lot of people said it looked like I was upright. I just think I was so fast over the hurdles in my unitization that I could get I'm on the ground and I'm upright a lot faster, because my flexibility allowed everything to happen at one time, all at once. So I didn't spend a lot. Like, for instance, if I wasn't flexible, then I'd have to have an exaggerated dive. Some people, you need to dive just to get momentum. I had enough speed, I had enough strength, so I just had to, be in the right position over the top. But I get down so quick that's what it looked like. I was vertical. Mm-hmm. But if you slowed it down, I was in the dive position. I just got down off the ground faster, and I was up vertically running. And then it also, by getting up so quickly, I could get my knees up because the hurdles were coming up fast. Because if I stayed in that dive long, as you know, gravity would pull you.
Wouldn't get your lead leg up.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get your chest would keep your knee from coming up.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be able to get back up. Gravity would pull me down.
Right.
Another question.
If you drew a line through his head throughout the race, his head never dipped down under that line or came way up above it either. If he had a line through his ears in a straight line, and pretty much maintained that line all the way down the line.
Mm-hmm. Here we got another question from Hector Cotto. This is for Ronaldo. Did anything feel different? 12.99 over 39s versus 12.99 over 42 inches. Let's see. Let's go with that question first.
Well, yes, it was different because in high school, it's the first time it's ever done, so it was a new experience. I fully expected to and was working toward breaking 13 the entire time I entered college. I almost felt that my legs were going to fall off me in that world record race because I was running so quickly trying to get away from Foster. But I can honestly tell you, I never thought about that I was going to fall. You know, I hear about guys talking about, what do you do when a hurdle comes up too fast? And I said, you just attack it. You know, I was never afraid. I just figured, I didn't think I was going to fall, but I wasn't afraid to fall, if that makes sense.
Right.
You know, Gene knows I would give 100%, period. You know, I didn't run a race 80%, 85%. Now, in county meets when I didn't have to run that fast, yeah, I didn't run 100%, you know, because I had to run other events. But when it mattered, I was at 100% all the time. And so when we were running faster and breaking national records, because each time is a new plateau, I just knew I had to get faster. We knew in practice we'd have to recreate a faster environment for my legs, you know, to run faster. And so we would just, you know, create it on the spot in practice. Try this, try that, you know, and we weren't afraid to do it. And if he brought it up, I'd try it, even if I was unsure, but I would try it because I wanted to run faster.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important for coaches to hear, the importance of creating drills, workouts, different spacings and whatnot to fit the issues that you're dealing with in races, as opposed to having a set plan. You know, I think that sounds like a big reason for your success is that both of you were willing to experiment and explore together.
I agree.
Yeah. Another question from Hector. What do you think the limit is in the 110 in terms of the world record? Interesting.
The limit?
Human possible limits for the 110 over 42.
I don't know limits. I know something in the 12.7s is possible. Now,
we don't know the limit until there is a limit, but
that's right.
I do believe, I always thought, even when I was running, you know, you could run, I thought 12.79, 12.78. Yeah, I think on my natural progressions and with the advent of all these synthetic tracks and the lighter hurdles, you know, had my career not been interrupted by football, you know, I ran 12.82 and 12.86 and didn't get credit for it because they said the watch malfunction. So back in my day, nobody thought you could run that fast. Today, you run that fast, you get the time. So I clearly know that I would have been right in that area. It's going to take a special race. There's no such thing as a perfect race, but you're going to have the ideal conditions and have a little luck going your way, you know. And I also think someone's going to have to be running 12.9 low to get you to go, you know what I mean? 12.8 to get you to go. I don't think somebody's going to be running 13.2 and you can run 12.79 by yourself. That's not going to happen. So the thought of that happening may be somewhat unlikely because a lot of things have to go right. A lot of things have to go right. Yeah. But I'd love to see Grant Holloway do it.
Yeah, if anybody seems like they're heading in that direction, it would be him.
What off-season or even in-season weight room work did you do to prepare yourself? I know you said you did a lot of things with flexibility, and is that one of the reasons why you felt like, even as a shorter hurdler, that you was able to manipulate those hurdles so easily?
Well, we had a universal gym in our high school, you know, just with bench press and the curls. So You know, I prided myself on trying to be the strongest guy. I may have been 150 pounds, but I felt I was physically strong. And then when I went to college, you know, obviously you have more advanced systems and weight coaches, strength coaches. So I got introduced to a little bit more advanced training, and I became very strong then, you know, doing all, you know, power cleans and different things of that nature. Not bulky, but just really strong for my size. And I think that's important. I didn't really lift a lot with my legs because I did so much running. So I did more, you know, upper body, shoulders, triceps, of course my chest, abs, things like that, calves, soleus, quad work, meaning more range of motion strengthening, functional training, you know, functional strength training, as opposed to just getting strong, because if it wasn't being useful in the event, it didn't matter. You know, I didn't need to have big thighs but I needed to have very strong calves and a strong and pliable Achilles tendon, you know, that kind of thing. In hurdling, I never pulled a hamstring ever. You know, and you know, so I wasn't a hamstring hurdler. I was a lead leg hurdler, but it came from through the quad, through the knee. So Gene taught me to come up through the knee as opposed to the swing motion that you have a lot of people swing. Then you got to pull back down. So that's twice taxing on that hamstring. So I never had problems with my hamstrings at all. Yeah, my injuries happened though, doing things that I shouldn't do that had nothing to do with track. But, yeah, I can honestly say I never got hurt running track. Well, I did get hurt. I pulled a hamstring as a sophomore, but I think that's because I was so small and I was running so aggressively because I was a fierce competitor, and just, you know, it was unfortunate. But you know, I went from 15.3 as a sophomore to 13.6 state record as a junior in that time span. And so that progression, you really can't explain it outside of it. I got stronger. I learned a lot from Gene. I was hungry. But when people ask me my progressions, I said, you don't want to know my progressions because they don't add up. 15.3 doesn't, and the next time you run is 13.6. That doesn't make sense. And then the next time you run is 12.9. So that progression is kind of crazy, but it happened. It did happen.
Now, do you feel like because you didn't swing your leg and you drove your knee, that was one of the reasons that contributed to you being able to get your lead leg down faster?
Yeah, Gene would stand on his, I mean, Gene couldn't go over a hurdle, obviously, but he would do the knee motion. He would show me, and he'd do the trail leg motion. We'd put the hurdle down low, and I'd just watch him do it, and I could just see what the knee was doing, the right angle. And then when you're extending over it and it opens, it's kind of bent. So I'm not up here and pulling up, and because if you throw the lead leg up, you go up. You got to wait for your body to come back down. It's like a whole two different pieces. So, you know, Gene would always piece it together, almost like a stick figure, but him doing it. And I just watch it, and then I try to say, okay, I can see that happening. And yeah, he just did everything perfectly that I understood it. And then we trial and error. Everything we did was trial and error. Unitization. I remember Gene, it took me a while to understand what that was and what that feel was. And he'd say it all the time, unitize. I'm like, what? And then when I finally get it, he goes, that's it. And I didn't know I was doing it. I had to take his word for it. So I'd say, okay, I know what that felt like. Let me see if I can feel that again. And he'd say, that's it. And then as I kept doing it, I knew what that feel was. So then that feel became something that I was familiar with. So I would run to make that feel. And that became a part of my hurdling. Everything was feeling what he was saying through his words. And he would give me affirmation, which told me I was doing exactly what he wanted me to do. And so I would, every time I go over a hurdle, I try to feel that feeling I had based on his affirmation. And you do that countless times, then it becomes, oh, okay. So now I'm running for feel. I'm not worried about the hurdle. I'm trying to replicate the feel. I'm trying to replicate what he said. And so his words became a feel, visual imagery. for me. And so we didn't spend a lot of time, like I said, trying to time out a race. It wasn't. It was like building blocks. Do this over and over and over again, and I would feel it. Do this over and over and over again, and I would feel it. And yeah, even the intervals, he's barking at me about the intervals and keeping up with Joe and the guys. And I would do it and not, despise him for it, but I would do it. And, you go run a race that you haven't done anything all year and you run something crazy and you're like, I'm gonna do what he says from now on. I'm gonna do what he says from now on. Yeah.
Great questions. Any other questions for Ronaldo or Coach Paquette?
Yeah, I got one more. So you guys made that video in 1991, High Hurdles. I think it was through Championship Productions. And, and I have a copy of the VHS somewhere. I know I still have it somewhere. Is there a way you guys can reintroduce this, replicate it, bring it back? The 36-minute thing that you both guys did in 91? Because you can't find it anywhere that I know of,
When you say reintroduce or replicate, what do you mean by that?
Bring it back on the market.
Oh,
As long as we don't have to go to Iowa.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying if somehow you guys can get it from Championship Productions to put it on YouTube or whatever you can do so that we can see some of these things more. So I remember it was a good video, but again, it was on VHS. Unless you convert things over, there is no DVD version of this thing.
And we never got to fully complete the video the way we wanted to. I was injured. Remember that, Gene?
Yeah.
And so some of the workouts that we wanted to be a part of that video, I was not able to do. I think at the jammings, I was not able to do.
Right.
We did as much as we could within my physical condition. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was so upset that, man, we can't even put, the real workouts that we want to do, which was the speed training part. So that's an element that wasn't, I don't think, in that championship production.
There is on YouTube, there is a clip from that video, I know, but not the whole thing. And Hector just said in the chat that he has the VHS. He can convert it into digital. So
yeah, if I said anything, I think flexibility is so important for hurdlers, and they need to spend a decent amount of time with their flexibility, because as you get based on your conditioning, that affects your flexibility in the race.
Yeah.
So the more flexible you are, the stronger you are, the more oxygen that goes throughout your body. If you're not fit, you're not flexible, the muscles aren't getting the oxygen, so they can't sustain themselves at that high level for so long. So you see a lot of guys that, they're so erratic in their times because basically they're just not fit. And there's a fitness to hurdling. Like I said, Grant Holloway, he can run 44, 40, whatever in the 400, he can run sub 20 in the 200. So clearly he's fit, he's going above and beyond. Every hurdler doesn't have to run that to run fast. There's different ways to get there. Daniel Roberts ran 13 flat as a senior in college. But he's not a good technical hurdler.
right.
And so he needs to spend time to perfect his technique. I think he could be Grant Holloway's worst nightmare, but Grant's almost 6'5". So Grant doesn't have to work that hard on his technique over the hurdle. Daniel Roberts might be a slight bit shorter than I am. I'm 6'1". And so if your technique isn't good and you're not as tall, your margin of error is smaller.
Yeah.
So that's, he's ideal height 6'1", but I think he needs to get a little bit more flexible so that he can be a little bit more fluid over the top of the hurdle. And that's the key for all hurdlers. It's a combination that Gene talks about, conditioning, and then of course, technical aspect of hurdling. A lot of high schools and even colleges, because of your calendars, you don't have time to put in the time of the breaking down the hurdle. You're spending time with a watch everybody's watch conscious. And I think you need to go back to fundamentals, because if you can put in the right technique, that's going to take you farther than anything else. All the speed in the world, be a bad technique, it ends up with a bad result at some point.
Yeah, Bernard, when you asked Ronaldo a question, you mentioned about when you swing the leg, right?
So,
And the point is, when does your toe get ahead of your knee in the lead leg action?
well, it should be as you drive the knee up, and then as you're over the hurdle, you want your toe to get ahead of your knee.
Sure. And if the toe gets ahead of the knee very early, that's a swing.
Okay.
But you're really leading into the hurdle with your knee, and
okay.
It's a step. It's not a swing. It's a big step. It's like you're stepping over the hurdle. You're not jumping, and you're not swinging your leg over. So where your toe is in relation to your knee, that toe doesn't want to get ahead of the knee too early in the motion. It's the knee leading into the hurdle, and then of course to get up over the hurdle. That will also allow you to, when you are approaching the hurdle too quickly, it'll let you make the adjustment and still be able to get it over. But a lot of guys, they get up too close to the hurdle and they can't get that knee up, and then they swing up into the hurdle.
Yeah, Tony Dees ran 13:05. Tony Dees was probably 6'4", but he had a swing lead leg.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he couldn't run under 13.
Mm-hmm.
He had the ability to run under 13, but when you're running against a guy like me or someone else who doesn't have a swing leg, and they're putting more pressure on you, and you're overstriding with a swing leg,
yeah,
you're either crashing into the crossbar.
That's what ended up having to Foster a lot of the time.
He starts crashing into the crossbar because what's faster, as Gene always say, swinging the leg up or bending and going. Can you do that faster than you can do this, the whole thing? It's a whole lever when it's swinging, as opposed to when you bend the knee.
Entirely different muscle group.
Get more power. Yeah, it's a different muscle group.
So do you think discounting those hurdles so they don't feel like they're too far away? Because sometimes my hurdlers feel like they're too far away, so they're almost swinging and long jumping into the hurdle to try to get their 3 steps. I'm trying to explain it's the momentum going into the hurdle is carries you to the next one, but trying to get that to translate has been so very difficult. Is there a certain drill that you kind of?
Are you only training at 10 yards?
Yes.
There's your problem.
Okay.
You can't create race conditions in practice by yourself. The adrenaline isn't there. You might want to, but it's different than race day. So that's how Gene got me to get my rhythm and my cadence by jamming, bringing the hurdles in to get those legs to work faster, which was getting me stronger, by the way, Gene, in my sprinting between the hurdles. And then when a race came up and you put them at 10, I was doing the same thing but it was 10 yards, not 8.5, 9 yards, And I think the only time I did 10 yards was in the race, because I really didn't
practice the 10 yards.
Yeah.
Never practice at 10 yards and never practice at 120 yards, full flight.
Yeah. I couldn't replicate the same adrenaline needed to get the rhythm for 3 steps, the fast 3 steps at 10 yards in practice. So we jam it because Gene always wanted that tempo and that rhythm. And so only time I ran at 10 yards was race day. I don't think, Gene, we didn't ever really work out at 10 yards.
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah, it was always, 8.5, 9 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can get, and you'll find out that they can do the 3 steps. And as they get more confidence, they'll have more power in those 3 steps. And then you can play games by moving them out 3 more inches without telling them, and they'll still be doing the 3 steps, but never do it at 10. So those kind of things you can do, but 10 yards is kind of hard for people to do that in practice. They don't get it,
Well, I want to thank you so much because I promise you this has been a lifelong dream to talk to you. Been from Maryland, grew up in Maryland, so we hear about Ronaldo, we hear about Skeets Nehemiah. Your conditioning, you ran 46 in the 400, correct?
In high school.
In high school, 46.5. You ran 44.2 at the Pens when he was in
college. I
college.
ran 44.2 in 19.3.
Do you feel like that also, just that strength over 400 meters, you're not going to get tired in the 110s because you're just that strong? Do you encourage 110 hurlers to do more 400 meter work?
Yeah, yes. Alan Johnson ran 44 as well. Yeah, once you accept it as a part of your training, then I think it has a profound effect on your psyche and your confidence from a strength standpoint. I mean, if you can embrace 400 meters, which takes some time to do because that's a hard race, but once you're able to accept that and comfortably run it, 110 is nothing. But you put forth the same effort in the 110 as you do the 400, meaning that I want to feel just as exhausted after the 110 as I do at the 400. Otherwise, I haven't run. If that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I heard a rumor that you, like 20 years ago, I was in college, that you could still run 48 seconds in the 400.
When?
Probably about 15, 20 years ago, you could still run a 48.
That might be greatly exaggerated. Yeah.
It might be exaggerated.
Yeah. I never ran another 400 after that Penn Relays 400. I'm still recovering from that.
We have another question in the chat. When you discount the hurdles for the gym and workout, do you discount the first hurdle?
Say that again?
It was touchdown to touchdown.
Oh, okay.
Do you discount the first hurdle?
You mean from start to the first hurdle?
Yeah, the 45
Yeah,
feet?
that doesn't count.
Okay, that's what I thought.
You start the clock when the lead foot touches down over the first hurdle, and you stop it, let's say after the fifth hurdle. So you're really getting the time for the 4 hurdle to the 10 yards, and that establishes the time. I don't even know. I mean, I'm sure we worked on it and stuff like that, but how much time, Ronaldo, did we, in terms of percentage of time, how much time did we actually work on just starts to the first hurdle? First of all,
10.
when we worked at starts, we always use 2 hurdles because there's a tendency with one to start to quit before you're over the first hurdle. So if you're working on starts, you should always do it with 2 hurdles because you want to come off and go to the second hurdle, and you're not going to quit.
Right. Want to stay in attack mode after the first,
Yeah,
and
that's
not
right.
quit in the air. You know, most
Right.
people just get to the first hurdle, take off, and then we don't know what you're doing because you're not competing. We did maybe 10% of the time, Gene. We didn't.
Not
It wasn't
very
a lot.
much. No.
Yeah.
No.
I think the question is, would you move the first hurdle in at all?
The first
first
hurdle
hurdle?
in?
No, you never touch it. It's
Okay.
15
To what?
yards. So what?
No. What our touchdowns? The touchdowns were the only time that we. No. Let me think.
First hurdle was a constant.
First hurdle is wherever it's supposed to be in a race.
Yeah, that's the constant. And then you can fool around with 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. But
Right.
yeah, you have to have 15 yards.
Right.
7, 8 steps, whatever you do.
Any other questions? Anyone? 3?
I'll hop in one more time. Women versus men. I know you talked about, having that forward lean. Do you look at training women going over the hurdle versus men going over the hurdle? Do you take that any differently?
A lot of it depends on the height of the woman. Kenny Harrison, who is the best American, she's not that tall, but she's technically pretty good. There are a lot of taller hurdlers now that are just sprinting because the hurdle is not really an effort. there's a mixed bag, but there's been an argument for years for them to raise it so they'd be forced to hurdle more. But yeah, she's shown even the taller girls, technique matters.
Yeah.
And so she's learned the right technique. She just ran, it was 12:54 in the heats yesterday, and then the finals it was win-aided, but she ran 12:38. And wow, I mean, win-aided or not, 12:38 is moving, and she wasn't hitting hurdles or anything. And she has to hurdle them because she looks like she's about 5'4".
Yeah.
So she's not a tall girl, but she has everything moving in the right direction. She leads with her knee. She's not a swing hurdler. Has her arms pretty tight and, going forward and back the way they should be going. Not a lot of wasted energy. Yeah. So a lot of the girls, to me, the real good girls, to me, are better technical hurdlers than the guys. They just aren't physically as strong.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. We're about half an hour over our time here. But another whole set of questions I had that I didn't get to, Ronaldo. Maybe we could do a part 2. I want to talk some about the Wilbur Ross training that you did that year, that summer. Wanted to look at some of the races that we have on that 54-minute video and break some of those down, because it looks to me like there was a progression in your style, subtle progression in your style from 78 to 82 that we'd like to look at. And so maybe we can get together again maybe next month or so and finish this. But I want to thank Ronaldo, obviously, for your graciousness and kindness and hopping on here. To hear you and Gene talk feels like I'm in the middle of a conversation that's going back 40 years or so. So that was really cool. And Joe Goody, a former teammate from high school, glad to see you guys. It's a really, really special thing. And everybody who was able to make it today and ask questions and pick the brains here. Thanks so much. So I'm recording this. I plan to, like the last time with the first one I did, to put it in my Dropbox, and then I can send you the Dropbox version, or just add you to the list on the Dropbox. Just add your email to it. I'll just go on a list of people who are on the call. I'll just do it that way, so you don't have to ask for it. Okay. And Hector will most likely make an edited version as well. Which will take a while. Get rid of some of the stuff that wasn't as cogent or whatnot. And maybe add some video footage and stuff. All right. Okay. All right. So again, thanks everyone, and
thank you.
That's it for now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Very
Thanks.
good.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Appreciate it.